Technical Writer HQ. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so Garrett Winn, I've been working in technical writing for 20 plus years, something. Worked at a variety of different companies from large to small size. Small little company called IBM for a while, and then some other small companies, various kinds of software. So I've mostly been in the computer software tech space for technical writing. Um, and also taught at my local university, writing and some technical writing.
And before we hop into some of the pieces of documentation that you've worked on in your career journey, I'd love to get an idea of how you hopped into this career journey. What did that look like?
Yeah, I started out in college thinking that I needed to get a job. I made a lot of money, and so I went into engineering and realized that that was not a good fit for me within a few weeks. So then I switched to computer science because I had always loved computers and would recode the Monopoly game we had on our computer. So I'd start out with more money than the 2000 normally, stuff like that. But it was pretty basic stuff back then in the day. And after about a year, I I could do it, but I just wasn't very fast. So I would take hours and hours where most of the class was doing, half hour or whatever on homework. And after taking a break, I went on a little trip to the Netherlands for a couple of years, just not doing college. Came back and had figured out in that time that really what I loved was writing and reading and English. So I became an English major and focused, just on the general education requirements for my undergrad, and then went into graduate school with the idea of becoming a professor of English and focus most of my work on rhetoric and language and realized after the first year that becoming a professor was going to be very difficult, a lot of competition, not a lot of pay, but benefits of teaching only a couple hours a day and summers off. But through all this time, I had been making my own websites, and I had just done a lot of stuff technical wise, and uh, there was a technical writing introduction to technical writing class that I took, and then I got in as a an internship doing technical writing for a local software company. They called it their intranet publisher, and it was basically writing help desk knowledge base articles, and for the internal employees. And so, when I figured out that, teaching as a professor probably wasn't a good career move for me or where I really wanted to go, I had then, heard about finally this technical writing thing. And it wasn't very common back then, but it was certainly something that interested me. It seemed like I had a lot of experience already in it and could start out very quickly. I started working, doing websites for some professors for different symposium and stuff like that they were working on, and then my studies in language and rhetoric and literature all kind of led me to a master's thesis that compared um, business websites across different cultures and using information design and rhetorical design as well as contrastive rhetoric. Anyway, all this kind of stuff and design principles, UI design principles, all kind of created this background for me that led to me getting that first real job as a technical writer.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a number of cool things here and a couple funny things. So like, internet publisher is like, the first thing that came to my head when you mentioned that. I was going, oh man, they really didn't know what they were hiring for, but most companies, don't when they're looking for a technical writer and they have these titles and you're like, well, this looks like something I want to do, but what is this title here? Um, yeah, and was the class that you took that was your introduction, was that at the university that you were at?
Yeah, it was at the university. It was actually advanced technical writing. Kind of went in with the rhetoric, was one of the options as part of that curriculum.
Very cool. And
And
then
then I took it and thought, oh, and so then I took the basic class because I wanted to learn more. And then I also ended up teaching that class as a grad student. So.
if there's one of the things that I've noticed about people who tend to identify in college what they want to do, they'll take extra classes and just to learn more. It's a very rare thing when you find someone who does that, but it means that um, they're fortunate by just putting out that energy and chances into the world that they're like, hey, I think this is something I want to do. So yeah, happy that you're able to identify that.
Yeah, me too. It's been a great career. I mean, I still have a long time left, but been a great.
And it seems like, from what you mentioned, that you have a good understanding of part of UX design, UX writing, from diving into design principles. Would you say that that's the case?
Yeah, I've done lots of UX over the years, whether it was helping to design. When I was at IBM, we called them advisors. They're kind of a poor man's wizard, a web-based wizard. But I designed the look and feel and how it all interacted. I even did the coding in Java to get it all working. And then I became a member of the Usability Professionals Association because I wanted to learn more about UX and design and get more into that area.
Very cool. And would love to hear about, now that you've taken like your step from having that strong foundation that I think many technical writers don't have, which is an understanding of uh, design principles to an extent, and as well as UX writing, which just makes your technical writing so much better. Um, how would you say like that has led to successes within your career after establishing that foundation?
It's definitely helped me to look at a broader range of opportunities, employment opportunities. It's a not as common to have that. Most technical writers, especially nowadays, have experience, English or communication or whatever. So they know how to write well, but they don't necessarily understand the visual representation of what's happening and how it all works together, or even being able to go in and edit the code behind all of the writing and understanding what it's doing. And it's actually led me now to being able to do a lot of API documentation, which is also a very kind of a niche area of technical writing. But because of that background in usability and in design and help, I'm creating this, call it a developer portal, where not only am I doing the documentation, but I'm kind of designing all of the pieces around it, from the forums to the API to the blog and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to dive into that a bit more. I would imagine setting up the information architecture or sort of the sitemap for it was a big part of that project.
Yeah, definitely. Um, And it started out with just the API documentation and the tutorial kind of documentation, where it was mostly me, because it's a one person or two person team at sometimes here. But creating that information model, what are the pieces that need to be in the API and how are we going to format them, and then got the tutorials, etc. But then also, what are the pieces? So doing research on what a developer portal is and how to help them best to integrate with the software that the current company I work for creates.
Very cool. And would love to dive into some of your favorite projects that you've worked on in terms of documentation. Are there any that come to mind right away?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of fun ones, like the advisors I mentioned previously. Just the tutorial kind of, or maybe a web-based tutorial, or wizard, I should say. It was just a lot of fun to do all of the research. I did a lot of, along with the usability, the UX kind of stuff. I did um, a lot of testing with fellow employees and going and talking with different, support and integrations kind of people to figure out exactly how it needed to work. It was a very complex process, so creating that wizard just made it a lot easier for people. There was a planning aspect that was very complex. If you do this, then this and this, but if you did this other thing, then this, and this, but then maybe not this. And so there was a lot of complications and just how you wanted to set things up. So doing that was awesome. And then it led me to even writing an article for a kind of a tech journal related to that, and related to that specific feature. So that was I'm a published author with my name and a byline even. So that was kind of cool. That doesn't happen a whole lot usually, and so it just led to me being able to do all of that things, and then kind of following on that, another favorite project was doing something, doing then usability testing at the next company I worked at. So because I had the design background, I was able to work with the development team to actually do user testing. So talking with actual users of the product. That hasn't always happened in my business. Technical writers can be kind of removed. We hear about it from the product owners or product managers, or whatever their names, their title is. But this one actually got me right directly, hearing how people were using it, seeing, even like watching them use our products and so forth. And that not only, of course, built my skills, but it was just a lot of fun and very informative in helping me to become a better technical writer. And then this one that I'm doing here, the developing or creating this developer portal, has been a lot of work, but also and a lot of new stuff that I hadn't done before. So after 20 years, it's fun to be able to say that, right? Something new, something different, and being able to take ownership of that and kind of be the sole advocate, maybe not sole advocate, at least the main advocate for it, um, and the one, the responsible party for getting it done.
And would love to dive in a little bit more into your current project in terms of just taking something like that on, because many of the people watching this interview are looking to hop into API documentation. They're also just looking to break into technical writing, and they're learning that API documentation is sort of the hot spot for technical writing today.
Yeah.
And they're going like, how do I, you know, take my first step? And understanding how to work with developers, build, like you're saying, documentation portal for developers, and much more. And sometimes they feel a bit overwhelmed. They're coming from backgrounds such as being, like you were saying, like an English teacher.
Right.
They're coming from backgrounds of something that's not very, I'd say, tech savvy, and they're having to be like, okay, I can still do writing, but it's just in this very technical way. So, what is your advice there for helping them overcome that challenge?
So I've actually had a couple associate level or brand new technical writers come in. And the thing that I've done with them and that I would suggest with anyone trying to get into API documentation is actually Tom Johnson's I'd Rather Be Writing blog. He has a whole series of lessons about how to write API documentation. And he starts from the basics. There's a video version of it, or a lot of his presentations, and it's pretty comprehensive. And he, has all of his references or other sites or whatever. But that really has helped the new people that I've trained who maybe didn't have a technical background at all to understand what it's all about and how what are the pieces and what do they need to know, so that they can really dive in on the parts that are unfamiliar.
Very cool. Yeah, I've visited that resource a number of times. I think that's the best resource that there is right now. I think if he was able to, like, I think someone needs to put in a more comprehensive way that's a little bit more easier to go through. I still think it's
Sure.
pretty easy to go through, but yeah, I think there's
Yeah,
one more level.
yeah, he goes into a lot of detail, and sometimes we need like a higher level, but or something that's maybe more basic, but
Yeah, I think there's a lot of internal links that he has, and all of a sudden I'm like, and clicking on this internal link and going to this blog article that goes to this other article, and I'm like, wait 1 second. I'm like, I'm trying to learn about
where am I going? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I had
Yeah.
to like bookmark where I was every time it changed so that I could get back and remember where where I had started. But definitely helpful for that. And then just playing around with it, really. There are, I mean, he walks through some scenarios of creating API documentation with some like Eris weather or another weather one. Anyway, using any of the number of kind of visual editors for API documentation, which is a little easier way to go than trying to hand write in open API format. But and so any of those, but doing it with a visual editor and then looking and seeing what it's doing on the back end is really helpful. So whether it's in Postman or Swagger, or I really like Stoplight. Yeah, any of those are really helpful in figuring it out. I like to do hands-on kind of stuff to learn. I can learn by reading or watching a video or whatever, but the actual hands-on, let me actually go and do this, really cements it for me.
Very cool. And it seems like, to do the work that you're doing today, there was several sets of knowledge needed. It's like you had to understand, information architecture of laying out a documentation portal, that also incorporates like UX design and UX writing. And from there, you have to also understand how like just documentation is stored right across this information architecture. And the last part is, okay, now I got to learn API documentation, how to include it into all of this.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but it seems like those are a step to work on projects like those for people watching, of what they would need to learn. It's not just like, hey, I learned API documentation. I can go do this project. It is encompassing, seems like, of all your skills that you've built up to this point.
Yeah, which is why this has been a great job. Currently, I really like where I'm working at now. I've been here about a year and a half, and I'm really enjoying it. The all of the skills that I've learned over the course of my career so far are definitely being brought into play. Plus, some making some new skills, but. Um, but it's easy to start out with a piece, right? It's easy to get overwhelmed, and so it's important to focus on just the one piece that you're interested in as a technical writer. Like, do you really want to learn the technical behind the scenes API kind of documentation? Does it come easy to you? Do you understand it? Or do you want to just you can learn it by going to Tom's site there, or learn about it at least and kind of see where it is, and then or maybe medical writing, or I had a friend who worked for a scrapbooking company doing technical writing, or there's all sorts of different kinds of technical writing. I worked with a guy who wrote manuals with the government, like military and helicopter manuals and stuff like that. That sounded really cool, but not anything that I could like. I don't have the skill to understand that kind of level of stuff, but some people do. So I think that it's important to take whatever your hobbies or your interests are, and you can find somewhere to apply that to technical writing. There's something out there for you. Um,
Yeah, I've talked to a couple people who have worked in aircraft technical writing, and they talked to me about these manuals that are over 1,000 pages and the amount of
yeah,
collaboration and years it takes to complete them. And I'm just going like, wow, there's areas of technical writing where this requires a whole different skill set
right.
to be able to push whatever project you're working on over the line. And
Yeah, the
yeah,
schematics alone, I can't imagine having to create those. Um, Here's where this one little bolt goes all the way through the diagram.
and you had mentioned that you've added a couple people to your team, and people watching this are looking to break into technical writing. What would you say are some things you look for when you're going to add a team member, and some of the qualities, characteristics?
For me, the biggest things I look for especially in a new technical writer, uh, is their ability to take complex information and make it understandable, or at least to know what questions to ask that they need to ask to make it more understandable. Like, hey, I don't. So I've usually given like a writing test to these new uh, interviewees that people I'm interviewing, and the first part shows them some pretty complex information and asks them to create a plan for how they would document it, as well as what kind of like an outline. So kind of see where they're at from a technical knowledge, but also what questions might they have to find that out, and then can they organize information in a way that makes sense. So being able to do that is important, even if they don't understand what it's talking about.
Yeah.
And then the second part is about how can you create a set of steps, instructions that um, are clear and easy to read. So I actually asked them to write out the instructions for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, um, given a certain scenario, and it is a little less scary than something else could be, right? Everybody knows how to make a sandwich pretty much, and um, it's interesting to see where people focus and how they create those documentations. If they have, you can kind of get a sense of personality from it too, which is really nice. But um, what I'm looking for mainly is, have they been able to be clear on the steps? Are they forgetting some very simple things. I used to do this as an actual activity in the technical writing class I taught, and they would have to write the instructions, and then they would switch with someone, and I actually had sandwiches they could make, and I told them they had to follow it exactly. So they'd get, peanut butter on one side of a piece of bread with jelly on the other, or which was really messy, or just you have to be specific as in technical writing. You have to be able to understand your audience and where they might run afoul of something. And then the last part just is about general editing. Can you find grammar problems in a document? And I have a time limit on it, in order to see how well they parse their time, because technical writing is, if anything, there's always something to do, and there's can be a lot of competing priorities in the job, and so seeing how they divide their time and make sure. I don't expect them to get everything done, but I tell them to get at least something in every section done. And so that tells me a lot about how they work, and can they split their thinking, or not split their thinking, split their time effectively, and change their focus quickly if needed. Like when somebody comes to your desk and says, "Hey, I need this right now," or a developer is finally free to talk to you, and so you have to go and interview them. It requires quick thought changes.
Yeah, I think being able set expectations and scope is so important. I know we covered a lot here today. This interview. Is there anything else that you would like to say or give advice on before we go?
Oh, goodness. I mean, there's potentially so much. I think just um, enjoy, enjoy it. Like I said, find what you enjoy, what's interesting to you, and then explore how that might look with technical writing.
Awesome. Well, Garrett, thank you so much for being here with us today with Technical Writer HQ and the community. And if you're looking to connect with Garrett, his LinkedIn URL will be in the description below this video. And if you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comment section, and I'll be sure to go ahead and respond to them. And again, thank you, and we'll rock and roll from here.